In my last video, I told you 63,000 people died at Waverly Hills Sanatorium. I was wrong. The real number is somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000. And before you click away, I need you to understand something. That's not a correction. That's the story. Because someone, somewhere, decided that 8,000 dead wasn't horrifying enough. That the truth needed to be inflated by a factor of 8 before it was worth your attention. Today, I want to ask why. And I want to show you what actually happened inside that building, because the truth is so much stranger than the legend, and in some ways, far darker. Facts are facts. But are they? To understand Waverly Hills, you have to understand what tuberculosis actually was. We don't fear it now. We have antibiotics. We have protocols. When someone gets TB today, it's treatable. But stand in 1900, and tuberculosis is the most terrifying word in the English language. They called it the White Plague. They call it consumption because that's what it felt like. It consumed you from the inside. You'd cough, then cough blood, then waste away slowly, while your lungs rotted in your chest. 1 in 7 people on Earth died from it. In 1900, Louisville, Kentucky had the highest tuberculosis death rate in the entire United States. Not the highest in Kentucky, in the entire country. By 1938, TB was the leading cause of death in the whole state, killing approximately 2,000 Kentuckians every single year. For decades, the city needed somewhere to put the sick. Somewhere away from the healthy. Somewhere with fresh air, elevation, and enough distance that the dying couldn't infect the living. They found a hill.
In 1883, Major Thomas H. Hayes stood upon a windswept hill southwest of Louisville. On this high ground, he built a family home, a place intended for peace and legacy. He hired Lizzie Lee Harris to educate his daughters, and she established a schoolhouse. Inspired by the novels of Sir Walter Scott, she named the school Waverly. She never could have imagined that this name would be etched into a medical nightmare. By 1908, the city of Louisville was paralyzed by a tuberculosis epidemic. The hill, once a family sanctuary, became the site for a desperate solution. On the 26th of July, 1910, the original Waverly Hills Sanatorium opened its doors. It was a simple structure for 50 patients, but the White Plague moved faster. The hallways overflowed with the sick, and the death toll began its terrifying climb. The crisis demanded a monumental response. In 1924, the city ordered a massive expansion. They chose a unique bat-wing design, featuring long corridors that angled backward, to capture every possible ray of sunlight for the failing lungs of the dying. When this new monolith opened in 1926, it could house over 400 souls. Nurses moved like ghosts through the wings, their footsteps muffled by the silence. Waverly Hills functioned as a self-contained city of the sick. Doctors performed experimental surgeries in a desperate bid for a cure. While families waited helplessly at the iron gates, thousands arrived with a flicker of hope, only to leave in the absolute silence of the grave. The era of the sanatorium finally came to an end in 1961, leaving the corridors to the shadows. Today, Waverly Hills remains a silent sentinel. It is a monument to a tragic and forgotten chapter of American medicine, a place where the echoes of the past still linger in the wind.
The year is 1943. Inside the Waverly Hills Sanatorium, the air is thin and biting. Elias pulls his wool blanket tight against his nose as a nurse glides past his cot. Snow drifts through the open-air porch, settling like dust on his eyelashes. He does not blink. He simply watches the man in the next bed, whose chest has finally stopped its rhythmic rise and fall. The nurse pauses, checks a pulse, and marks a chart with clinical indifference. She does not cover the body. She moves on. This is the rhythm of the ward. Every 4 hours, the temperature is taken. Every day, the hierarchy of the dying is reinforced. Elias watches the man at the end of the hall receive his test results. A ragged, wet cough echoes. and the ward falls into a heavy, suffocating silence. No one offers comfort. They all know the math of the lungs. When the fresh air fails to heal, the doctors arrive with cold steel. Elias is wheeled into the operating room, the metal gurney rattling against the floor. He sees the surgeons standing over him, their faces bare, their breath visible in the freezing room. They wear no masks. They do not fear the air they breathe, for they are the ones who command the blade. One surgeon picks up a heavy bone saw. He begins the thoracoplasty, a brutal procedure to force the lung to collapse. Elias feels the vibration of the saw against his own frame, a sound that drowns out his own heartbeat. He wakes up days later, his chest a map of jagged healing scars. He is alive, but he feels hollowed out, a shell of the man he was before the winter took hold. He stares at the ceiling, listening to the drip of the IV, wondering if the air he breathes is a cure or a slow, agonizing poison. Down the hall, the children's pavilion is quieter, yet the suffering is just as profound. A group of children sits on the rooftop patio under the harsh, artificial glare of ultraviolet lamps. They are told to keep their eyes closed, to let the light burn the bacteria from their pale skin. They sit in rows, tiny bodies shivering in the biting wind, waiting for a cure that the sun will never provide. They are small, fragile soldiers in a war they cannot win. Their breaths are shallow, their eyes tight shut against the light. They do not cry. They simply wait for the next round, for the next dose of light that offers nothing but the illusion of hope. It is a scene of quiet devastation, a testament to the desperation that defines these walls. By sunset, the nurses finish their rounds. They leave the windows wide open to the winter night, coughing into their own hands. They carry the disease they try to cut out of others. In the morning, the snow will cover the porch again, and the cycle will begin once more. You stand at the very top of the steep incline. Before you lies the body chute, a 500-foot concrete throat carved deep into the hillside beneath the sanitarium. This is no ordinary hallway. It is a secret passage designed for the departed. Decades ago, the staff realized a devastating truth. When patients in the solarium saw bodies carried out the front door, their will to live shattered instantly. They saw their own futures in those draped stretchers. To keep the living fighting, the staff turned to the shadows. They repurposed the old supply rail system for a darker task. Now, the dead would exit in total silence, hidden from the windows and the watching eyes of the hopeful. Imagine the scene. A motorized cable groans under the weight, pulling a gurney down the steep, dark slope. The air here is thick with dampness and the heavy smell of wet earth. There is no light in this tunnel, only the rhythmic, haunting click of the rail as it descends into the dark. For 35 years, this tunnel served as the final path for thousands of souls. Dr. J. Frank Stewart recorded the grim math of this place: 152 deaths in a single year. That is one body every 60 hours, moving through the dark. During the final months of World War II, the pace accelerated to a terrifying speed. Soldiers returned from the front lines, their lungs ravaged by tuberculosis. They had survived the hell of the trenches only to succumb in these quiet rooms. Often, within a single week of arrival, they were placed on the rail and sent down the chute. This was the silent cost of a forgotten plague, a conveyor belt of tragedy moving beneath the feet of the living. Today, the tunnel remains a dark echo chamber. If you walk down, the incline is steep, but the climb back up is a grueling test of endurance. The concrete is slick with moisture. Bats cling to the ceiling, and insects skitter across the floor. You are standing in the path of a silent, constant procession. This is not a ghost story. It is the cold, hard history of a place that hid its losses to preserve a fragile, desperate hope. Every step you take in this darkness follows the path of those who never returned. So where does 63,000 come from? Based on death certificates filed from 1911 onward, Researchers estimate approximately 6,000 people died at Waverly Hills. A separate source citing more specific records places the figure at 8,212. Dr. Stewart's own records show the worst single year produced 152 deaths. The 63,000 figure most likely represents the total statewide death toll from tuberculosis in Kentucky during the height of the epidemic. Not deaths inside the building itself. Someone conflated the two, and it spread. Because 63,000 is a number that makes people share a video. 8,000 is a number that makes people think. But here is my question. The one I keep coming back to. Why wasn't the truth enough? 8,000 people died inside that building. From a disease that rotted their lungs while they lay in the snow on an open porch, while doctors removed their ribs 2 or 3 at a time trying to save them, while nurses worked without masks and got sick themselves, while children received sunlight treatments on a rooftop, while bodies traveled a secret underground tunnel so that the other patients wouldn't see them and give up. Why did someone need to multiply that by 8? I think it's because the real story asks something of us that the ghost story doesn't. The real story requires us to sit with the fact that humans built that place, humans worked in it, humans died in it.
And humans did their absolute best with what they had, and it still wasn't enough.
That's harder to watch than a shadow on a wall. In 1943, a 23-year-old graduate student named Albert Schatz, working in a lab at Rutgers University, isolated streptomycin, the first antibiotic effective against tuberculosis. Within a decade, the white plague that had killed 1 in 7 humans for centuries was manageable, treatable. By 1955, Waverly Hills recorded just 42 deaths for the entire year. In June 1961, it closed as a tuberculosis hospital. The remaining patients were transferred to Hazelwood Sanatorium. And then something happened that rarely gets mentioned in the ghost tour brochures. In 1962, the building reopened as the Woodhaven Geriatric Sanitarium, a facility for elderly patients with dementia and severe disabilities. This is where the story gets darker in ways that have nothing to do with tuberculosis. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, budget cuts gutted the facility. Electroshock therapy became standard practice, used widely on elderly patients for a range of physical and mental conditions. A room on the first floor, near what had been the auxiliary morgue, still exists today. Visitors can see it on the tour. It is labeled Electroshock Therapy Room. As funding dried up, conditions deteriorated. And then, during a fire inspection, inspectors made a discovery. Staff were housing patients on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors. Floors the facility wasn't licensed to operate. Patients they didn't want to deal with had been moved to unlicensed wards on the upper floors and left there, forgotten. The investigators who found them called them the Forgotten Ones. The state of Kentucky closed Woodhaven between 1981 and 1982. The remaining patients were transferred to the Hazelwood Center. Here is something the paranormal community almost never acknowledges. Many of the specific ghost reports from Waverly Hills, the entities on the 4th floor, the legends of Room 502, the reports of suffering on the upper levels are tied to the Woodhaven era, not the tuberculosis era. The pipe often cited as the hanging point in Room 502 wasn't installed until 1972. The Kentucky Death Index shows no record of the nurse named Mary Hillenberg, who allegedly died there in 1928. The Forgotten Ones of the 4th floor are Woodhaven patients, not tuberculosis patients. An entity investigators call Thomas, reported repeatedly on the 4th floor, is believed to be a victim of the geriatric center's neglect. Another presence, described as a large black mass and called Big Black, is also associated with the upper floors of Woodhaven. The building absorbed 2 tragedies, and we've been telling the story of only one of them. After Woodhaven closed, the building sat empty. In 1983, a developer bought it and proposed converting it to a minimum security prison. Locals protested. The plan was abandoned. In 1996, a religious organization purchased the property and proposed building the world's tallest statue of Jesus on top of the sanatorium. They couldn't raise the money. That idea died in December 1997. By the late 1990s, the building was in ruins. Vandals, decay, the roof failing. In 2001, a couple named Charlie and Tina Mattingly purchased Waverly Hills for $250,000. They stabilized it, installed a new roof in 2007, replaced windows, began tours. Today, it operates as a historic landmark history tours, ghost tours, overnight paranormal investigations. The gift shop is in what used to be the auxiliary morgue. The building has 180,000 square feet. It has one working power outlet. Investigators run hundreds of feet of extension cords through the dark to power their equipment. The silence inside is broken only by dripping rain, doors slamming in off-limits wings, and bats flying through the hallways. I don't have a problem with the Mattingleys or the tours. They saved the building. Without them, this history disappears. But I think about what gets told on those tours versus what actually happened. The 63,000 number. The nurse who likely never existed. The pipe that wasn't installed until 1972. The children who received sunlight therapy on the rooftop. The soldiers who survived the war and died within a week of checking in. Joe Davis's father, watching his entire social circle die around him. Those people don't need the number inflated. They don't need legends invented around them. Their story is already the most human and most heartbreaking thing I've come across. Facts are facts. The fact is that tuberculosis killed millions of people, and Waverly Hills was built to fight back against it with almost nothing. No cure, no protective equipment, no real understanding of how the disease spread. The fact is that somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 people died inside that building over 50 years, not 63,000. The fact is that someone thought the real number wasn't enough to hold your attention. I disagree. The body chute is more disturbing when you know it was built out of compassion. The surgical procedures are more disturbing when you know the doctors performing them weren't sure if they would work. The Woodhaven years are more disturbing than Room 502 because they happened in living memory. There are people alive today who remember it, and we still don't talk about it. I was born in 1981, the year the state of Kentucky was shutting Woodhaven down for patient neglect. The forgotten ones were still being discovered when I came into the world. The children in the snow. The soldiers who died within a week. The forgotten ones on the unlicensed floors. The one working power outlet in 180,000 square feet of silence. Those are the facts, and they're enough. I'm ObscuraCast. I go where the story is. And I'll tell you what I actually think, even when it's not what you want to hear. Subscribe.